All right, thanks, Hank. Calling to order the City of Huntington Woods Zoning Board of Appeals. It's February 15th, 2022. It is 7:35 PM. First thing I'm looking for is an approval of the agenda. Looking for a motion. I have a motion.
Second.
And a second. All in favor? Aye. Next.
Mr. Chair, just for a point of order on this, the microphones need to be where they're at, and we need to speak into them or it does not pick it up, and it's difficult with the masks and everything for
Okay.
the public to hear.
Yep.
So if you can make an effort to speak up and keep the microphones right.
You want me to go start over?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay.
Yeah, because the motion's already been taken and voted on. So.
Next on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the November 8th, 2021 meeting. I am looking for a motion to approve or any amendments.
Motion to approve.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All right, we move on to the appeals for the evening. The first one on the agenda is a matter of an appeal from Gregory Bartlett, 12793 Vernon, from section 40-4.03 R-1A through R-1E, one family district schedule of regulations to allow an attached structure to encroach 1.28 LF into this required lease side yard, leaving a total of 3.72 IF, where 5 feet at least side is required. Is the applicant here? You can just come right here in the middle.
Hi, I'm Greg Bartell. My wife and I are remodeling 12793 Vernon, and there was an existing structure attached to the garage, and I've got photographs of it here. When we went through the remodel, it was really falling apart, so we tore it down and we put it back up. But we didn't realize that we had to get approval for it, so I apologize for that. We built it back the exact way that it was before. The foundation was there, so we just used the same foundation. I've got photographs, if that helps, of the structure before we tore it down. That's it right there. So this is how we've rebuilt it. This is all steel, so we're doing this steel.
Excuse me, if I could ask, you're going to have to say this so that you're on the microphone.
Oh, sorry.
And then anything that has to be passed around has to end up.
Do you have these pictures, Hank?
I do not. So
Okay.
when you're done with them, they have to end up.
Okay,
with
great.
me.
All right, got it.
Last one. This is what it's going to look like when it's done. This is the way it's
I'm going to need you to speak into the microphone.
Yep. So at this point, we had already rebuilt it. So it's been rebuilt. That's a custom steel modern screen that supports, the overhang. The piece will be covered in metal. So it'll be covered in metal, similar to the photograph that I have of the overhang that have already been redone. So you'll see those in there in a black metal, and then the outside will be covered in ethos and that cedar, clear cedar, 2x2 sticking on the side. So it'll be a pretty architectural feature. From what I understand, and this is a question for you, my builder said that actually it says here in the minutes that it's the side lot, but I believe it's the rear of the lot because the address is on Vernon, and I believe that it's actually the rear. I don't know if that makes a difference or not. I think the setbacks are not I think they're more flexible in the rear for what it's worth. But it says here in the minutes that it's the side. I've got a letter from the neighbor, too, that's right next to us saying that they like what we did. So I think you've got that.
Yeah, they have it.
They have it, yeah.
Hank, can you clarify his side, back, rear distinction here?
Yeah, that would be, what he just said would be incorrect. The lot actually fronts off a parking.
Okay.
Making that a side yard. And if it was a rear yard, it would be in more violation because the rear yard would be 30 feet that you need, not 5 feet. So by being the 5 feet, he's encroaching a small amount of the 1.28 linear feet into the side yard. There's no question that the building was always there, and it became a legal non-conforming So the problem with legal non-conforming structures is once you tear it down, you lose your vested right to have it. Having said that, it was there, it served a purpose. The neighbor was always fine with it and still is, but you can see where the envelope is and you can see the dashed lines as to where the envelope is. So you can see the encroachment that goes past the dashed lines. Now, here's a few unique things about this that might be helpful as far as making your decisions. When you take a look at this and you see how the lot is situated, you have almost a peninsula lot. So even though it's off of Parkwood, the front of the house faces Vernon. That makes absolutely no difference, thank you, makes no difference with respect to zoning of it. The front is still the front by definition, which would be Parkwood. Inadvertently, that helps its cause because the ask is significantly less than it would be any other way. So just so that there's, no misunderstandings, I want to go through the special conditions and circumstances, which is standard number 1. It has to be unique to the property, the land, or the building involved. And here the house is situated in an irregular manner on an irregular lot. The nonconformity was there, but once it was removed, they lose any grandfather or effect to that. But the problem is that even no matter how you situated this on the lot, you'd pretty much be in violation of something. So that's kind of where it's at with that. So right now, when you take a look at it, I'm going to blow this up a little bit so that you can see it a little better. The front of this garage is actually 19 feet 8 from the property line. 19.82. Here you're looking at 3.72 to the lot line. And then point out that there's also, this is the driveway down here, if you can see this. So when you see that, you also see that there's more green space here. So there is green space on the side of this driveway. This neighbor here is the one that has no objection to this. It would clearly be the most affected by it. But I just want to bring up the fact that it was a non-conforming structure. They did do it. The contractor, once he was notified, came in right away, worked on it, got us the survey that we needed so we could determine what it is. They're here before you asking for it. I will tell you that they've spared, well, actually, he will tell you too, that they've spared no expense on this house. And it's not that it's not well built or anything like that. It says it needs the variance in order to occupy the square footage on the lot that it has today. The variance will not be injurious to any neighborhood, or any otherwise detrimental to the general welfare. Again, there's been phone calls, there's been no adverse communications. The south neighbor had no objections and has indicated so. Standard 3, the special conditions and circumstances do not result in actions of the applicant. The house, the driveway, the configuration or location pre-existed, it's Bartelt, right?
Yes, Bartelt,
Okay,
thank you. Yeah.
So I didn't want to do that, I think I did it once or twice.
No, that's good.
The house driveway configuration and location pre-existed his ownership, and the proposed design would be consistent with what was always there. The issue again is the taking it down and putting it back in the exact same location. In standard 4, a literal interpretations of the provision of this ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under the terms of this ordinance, and the variance is the minimum necessary. This is a situation where you look towards the spirit of the ordinance. It's a clear violation of the code and an error on the part of the contractor. You may want to take into consideration again the shape and configuration of the lot and the space left to put even a conforming shed in by code. If you take a look at the way that this is laid out, and you see that the house is over here. Let me pull this back a little bit here. And then you take a look at where this is in the space here, that would put a shed back in here, which would not be readily accessible or really accessible from this being the only area that you could back to it or over here. So it's kind of awkward in that respect. So having said that, I mean, I'm certainly, Mr. Bartelt is able to answer any questions that you might have, and I will try to do the same. Mr. Chair?
I'll open it up to questions before we open it up to the public. Questions from the board?
I don't really have any questions, but you bought the house, you bought it with that space that was legally there. It's been there for decades, I'm assuming. You kind of have a choice, you either let it fall apart and degrade, or you rebuild it, which you seem to be doing the right way. I mean, I think it'd be silly to deny this.
Yeah,
I'm
I
fully
get,
in support of you rebuilding something that you paid for to begin with.
yeah, I guess my question would be, would there have been a way for you to redo this, having not quote-unquote torn down the structure, and thus and I don't know if this is a question for the applicant or for Hank, but, I mean, to the extent you could have done that, I don't think we should penalize them
50%.
for doing something like that.
Right, Hank, you replace like 50% of the materials.
If you're over 50% of the structure has to be torn down, then the structure is considered demolished.
It's considered torn down, okay.
And the issue with this then becomes is that whether or not the shed at 3.72 lineal feet would be wide enough to make any appreciable difference of its intended use, which is where they were at with it. So they don't have a lot of space. Like if you take a look, let me pop this up for you a little bit here. So here, if you take a look at this, the shed is only 5 feet wide. So if you were to take this off and you were going to give them less than that, so you'd be 3.25 roughly feet wide on the shed, so you'd have a 3-foot wide shed that would be this long, or you'd have an irregular shed to the point where it goes down here and have to meet the property line. So I mean, I guess the thing is that if you're if you're in a position where you feel that this is kind of a unique situation and you can approve it, then you would approve it giving him use of the full 5 feet. If not, then the shed would have to come down.
And the size of the shed did not change it.
No, it's on the same foundation.
Yeah, I would argue that this is more of a repair.
Right.
Well, is it, right, and this may be like more metaphysical ship of Theseus, don't look that up. But like, I mean, is the shed before, was it like structurally discrete from the garage, or did you just basically fix the dilapidated back of the garage?
So it's the same design. So we carried the roof line, the overhangs, the soffit, carried it straight across, and we built it exactly the way it was. So that the garage overhang, carries straight into the shed. You can kind of see it in the photograph.
Right, so in that, if we think that it's, the ship is the whole garage into the existing non-conformity, then you definitely didn't remove 50% of it. Maybe you removed 10% of it, 15% of it.
Well, the walls all came out.
Yeah.
Well, the walls of the shed, but if the shed is really just, 10 or 15% of the garage, since it's architecturally uniform or consistent, cohesive, then I think you sort of, in that scenario, you maintain your nonconformity.
If you want to determine that this shed is part of the garage, then that would be a correct statement. The shed's outside of the framework of the garage.
Is the foundation the same of what the garage?
I don't think so, but I don't know. So because the roof was all, connected, it shared a common wall.
Right.
So a common wall was shared, but I'm assuming that it looks as if it was done when they built the house, but I think it's a separate foundation. There is a footing,
Right.
around the perimeter, so there is a footing there. But I don't think it's the same slab.
Got it.
But it looks as if it was done when they built the house originally. From what
I will tell you that shed has been there as long as since I was a kid. That shed's been there.
No stories.
years ago.
We don't.
If no one has any more questions, I'm going to open it up to public participation. Anyone from the public want to speak on this matter? Hearing or seeing nobody, I'm going to close public participation and open it back to the board, either for discussion or a motion.
I think one point to make here, if there's a garage next door, and it kind of creates a pinch points for access to the power lines. In this case, however, there's plenty of access on the other side, so I personally don't see that as an issue.
what we did was and you can tell from the photographs, we did arborvitaes So we actually gave our neighbor, we talked to the neighbor in great detail about what we should do with that space. There was a fence there. We took the fence down. It was just a chain link fence. And then we put arborvitae's in, and we left him more room to expand his driveway if he wants to, because the fence was closer before. So we actually gave him more room than he had before, and we have a little walkway between the arborvitae and the shed for us to get in the back.
I'll make a motion to approve as presented, due to irregular lot size and no adverse effects on neighboring property.
Second.
Either.
All right.
Was David going to be the
Rock,
second?
paper, scissors.
David's the
She's
second.
got
Okay, Bree will be
Bree.
the second.
Okay.
That's brief, fine, that's fine. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All set?
We have a post.
Wait,
Pardon me?
might have one opposed.
Any
Opposed?
opposition?
Any opposition?
I'm an alternate.
He's an alternate.
Oh.
Yeah, you can't vote.
Oh, sorry.
And he's here to judge.
To judge us.
All set?
Okay, so you're all
runs in
set.
the family.
Thank you very
Thank
Thank you,
you.
gentlemen and lady.
All right.
Thank you so much.
All right, the next item on the agenda, matter of an appeal from Chris Morgan Associates on behalf of the Talbot family. 25857 Concord, section 40-4.03R-1A through R-1E, one family district, schedule of regulations to allow a variance to the maximum house size where of 3,834 square feet is proposed and 3,100 square feet is allowed, making it a 734 square foot variance, and to allow a variance from the same section to allow for a variance of 2.7% lot coverage for a total of 32.7%, where 30% is allowed, and a variance to alter an existing non-conforming space being the existing third floor of the house where 2 floors are allowed in the R1C zoning district.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I'm Chris Morgan from Chris Morgan and Associates, and this is Shane Talbot, and this is Steve Beckisher, the owners. So we've got the 3 variances that you just read through, and I'm going to address the 734 square foot variance first and then work our way through. Hank, if you could put up the existing main level floor plan, that would be great. Okay, so to start off, when my clients bought this house, they realized that there was some definite lacks that this house has compared to houses typically built nowadays. One, it had a very small kitchen. The family room, or what we're calling the TV room, was quite small. It had no mudroom or rear entry of any kind. And upstairs, it has no primary suite to speak of. And it's a 4-bedroom house with 1 bathroom upstairs, 1 small bathroom. So the goal was to be able to address these issues. One of the biggest problems that this house really has, which we consider all of these hardships, but is the lack of a rear entry. So right now, it's a detached garage in the rear yard, and you have to walk around to the front door to be able to get into the house. So obviously we wanted to address that. One of the things that came up, when they bought this house was listed as a 2,336 square foot home, which would have given our clients about 764 square feet to work with to address these issues. As it turns out, that was incorrect. The house was actually 2,917 square feet, which only gave us 183 square feet to work with. And what happened essentially was there was the finished 3rd floor of 630 square feet, which must have been done at some point under the radar. Oakland County didn't have that in their records, and so therefore they didn't have the square footage that they thought they were going to have. So we knew we were going to end up having to come for a variance. The plan was always to add 10 feet to the back of the house. I think if you could throw up the main floor addition plan. I think that's the other file. Okay. So the plan was always to add 10 feet across the back of the house in order to give us a kitchen that is in keeping with houses nowadays, a little nook area, and a nice family room. None of these rooms are oversized. And then again, upstairs to do a primary suite with a master bathroom and a walk-in closet. We, of course, also wanted to do the mudroom area. It became apparent that with the width of the house, to make the mudroom integral to this 10-foot addition, it was going to take up too much real estate. So we ended up having to push the mudroom to the back of the house. And Hank, if we could throw up the rear elevation. One more, there we go. So to do that, the mudroom's only 80 square feet. It's 8 by 10. It was going to look like just a little kind of a node stuck on the back of a house, and it wasn't going to be very attractive. We were always planning on having a deck because there's a large deck on this house right now, so we were planning on maintaining a deck space. So we came up with the idea of creating a roof area that would incorporate the deck and the mudroom and give this a nice cohesive design, a nice balanced design, instead of having this tiny little room sticking off the back of the house. Unfortunately, by doing that, it created a lot coverage issue because we're requesting a 2.7% lot coverage. We're actually only going to be 1.6% over, but with the set aside of 480 square feet for the accessory structure, we have to ask for the 2.7. But we're really only about 80 square feet over. And the other thing I would point out too is that this lot is on the smaller side. We don't qualify for any lot bonus as far as square footages. So we're limited to the 3,100 square feet, which also, of course, raises our percentages up as well. And then for the third floor, so the third floor exists already. The only change we're looking to make there is build the staircase, which doesn't meet code currently, so it stretches the staircase out quite a bit. And in doing so, so that we can keep a nice kind of small sitting area up there, I rotated the bathroom 90 degrees, and that gave us a little nicer working area up there. But other than that, we want to maintain that. And again, that's 630 square feet, which when that's added to the calculation of the house, it really gives us almost nothing to work with. So, so we feel like that these hardships are created not by our clients. It's an older house. It was how houses were built back in the 30s, and they don't kind of keep up with what's going on nowadays. And so we just want to bring the house up to what a lot of people already have in Huntington Woods. I know myself, I've done probably 50 projects where I've done family room, master suite additions, and mudroom additions, and covered porches on backs of houses. And it's a very common goal to have. So in summary, I would say that we feel our requests are reasonable and that they're not self-created. We feel that we're not negatively impacting the neighbors. In fact, we have support from the neighbors to the south and to the north. From the road, we're not changing the massing whatsoever. The roof line, everything stays the same from the road. The ridge is not being raised. You can see from the side view, the existing gable, that's maintained, and we're just adding the reverse gable off the back of the house. So from the road, you won't be able to tell any difference. And so I think in the house itself, as long as we've made it, it's still quite a bit shorter than the house to the north. And if you want to throw up the site plan, I can show that. That's actually back in the other file, I think. Sorry.
All right, we'll get it figured out for you.
So yeah, you can see where, so you can see we're still tucked behind, there you go. We're still tucked behind the house to the north. That house is very long, and we're going to be still quite a bit behind that. And it's almost a stair step now from their house to our house to the house to the south. So I know my client wanted to say one thing, and then we'll take any questions or let me take it.
Yep, go ahead.
Thank you. I'm Shane Talbot, and it's my husband, Steve Nakasher. We fell in love with Huntington Woods 18 years ago when family members of ours moved to the woods, and we've loved it ever since. And when we decided to leave Chicago, we kind of knew that this is where we wanted to be. So when we started looking, we found this house, and we fell in love with it. We fell in love with the architecture of the house, the style and design of the house, and it's a lot of what we love about Huntington Woods is the architecture and the character of the house. So we knew that even if we found a house, we would want to maintain its existing character, its existing design and style, because that's already something that we love. So when we also came across this house, it truly was that we saw it listed as the 2,300 and some square foot, that we thought, oh, well, then we have some room to work with. And that influenced our reason to purchase the house. So it was definitely part of that decision. We, as I said, we love the design of the house. We don't want to make it look any different from standing outside on the street. We're trying to maintain everything from the character on the outside that we can, and just build a house that we love. Thank you.
All right, thanks. Hank?
Thank you. I'm going to start on this page just because, just because we can. So if you take a look at this right here, and is it easier for me to use this? Maybe if I turned it on. Do you see that better than you see the cursor? Okay, so let me show you this here. What Chris was talking about for set aside was for the garage. In an R1C zone district, your set aside is 480, meaning you're charged, if you will, 480 square feet, whether your garage meets that or not. If it exceeds it, you're charged for the additional square footage as far as lot coverage. And the reason is that the lots were originally sized and deemed that on an R1C lot, the 480 square feet would be what would be appropriate for a garage for that size lot in that zone district. Now, having said that, all the lots in the R1C zone district are nowhere near the same size. That's just a fact of zoning, it happens. So when you do that, you take the lots that are most compatible, and that's what you include. The lot that he has here is 50 feet wide, and it's exceptionally deep. So you're basically looking at something that is deep. It's 147 lineal feet deep. So it's there. The garage is at the back. So the fact that the addition's coming off the back would not necessarily impinge on the space that may be used for this at a later time. It boils down to square footage of lot coverage and percentage of lot coverage for that. The biggest issue that they have, which Mr. Morgan touched on, is basically they've got no way to get in the house. So if you take a look at this and you see where they're at right here, they actually have to go all the way around the house and to the front door in order to get there. So if they pull in with the wintertime groceries, anything like that, where the new design would let them come right in here, they wouldn't have to carry everything around to the front of the house. So that would be a problem. I do also want to take a minute, because I would be remiss not to mention the fact that this is one of our more famous houses in Huntington Woods, and this is actually the Dondero house. And a lot of people would know this based on, Dondero High School, and, which is now Dondero Middle School. There was a lot having to do with this house, and this house was the actual Dondero house where he lived. So the sensitivity that Mr. Morgan's paid to the architecture for this, for one, I'm appreciative. But having said that, back to this type of thing here, so we're looking for a 2.7% lot coverage, and we'll have to go to the floor plan to really show you where that falls in. And then for the existing third floor. The third floor always existed in this house. It's been there for as long as you can remember. The staircase was not great, but it was used originally as an attic space and finished long before any of this was zoned. And it was built before it was zoned. It's before we were a zoned community. So when you're taking a look at like the special or unique conditions and circumstances which exist, which are peculiar to the land, structure, or building involved, which are not generally applicable to other land, structures, or buildings in the same zone district. So the house has a third floor, which is part of the renovation, but it's existing as living space. And the classification isn't zoned for it, nor does it take into consideration for the third floor. So there's two ways to look at this. Okay, you got the third floor, it is what it is, you have it, they're not gonna make you take it out. So he wants to maintain it because it's already there. And he wants to actually enlarge it, add a few walls, and the reason for that is to make it useful in conjunction with what it is. Having said that, the inverse of that is that most of the houses that are in Huntington Woods get charged, if you will, for space that is 2 floors. So if it's my house and I want to put an addition on it, I get my first floor and second floor square footage. The third floor that was always there but was never zoned for, not supposed to be there or whatever, but however it got there, it's there and it's been there forever and ever and predates their ownership. That actually, you might take a look at that and say that that's a potential practical difficulty, and that they weren't expecting to have to be used for that space. But having said that, it's there. So you'll have to either legitimize that, or you'll have to figure out, depending on what, Mr. Morgan's saying, whatever it is or whatever other options there are. The third floor, as it sits now, is entirely within the enclosed structure. So there's no, as it sits now, there was no modifications made to use that third floor space. It's there. And again, the variance for standard 2, the variance will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the general welfare. There have been phone calls in favor, as well as communications that were copied into your agenda packets, all which have been favorable. I did receive a phone call where somebody had some concerns about the amount of impervious surface that they were losing as a result of this addition, and I'll let Mr. Morgan speak to that. But I do want to point out that as you're taking a look at the lot and the plot and the lot that you have here, that is all the space that you have that is not taken up by house. I don't want to mislead anybody and tell people that this is all open space because that's driveway. So that's kind of what you have there. But I'll let Mr. Morgan address that.
Yes. So again, in actuality, we're only going to be 1.6% over, but because of the set aside, we'll be asking for the 2.7. 1.6% on this lot equates to 80 square feet. Our intentions are to maintain through gutters and grading and if necessary, even a catch basin to maintain all stormwater on our property and not let the water, go into other people's property. But again, we're talking about a very small area that we're over, and with the grading of the lot, I don't see this as going to be an issue of any kind. We'll be able to manage the water without a problem.
So the garage is currently 400 square feet.
It's 20 by 20, yep. And we have no plans of changing that.
Is there a back door to the house now?
No, there's a sliding glass door right next to but you can't unlock it from the outside. So you have to go around, like either you got to keep it unlocked all the time or you have to go around to the front. And that area of the house, the way it sits right now, it's the way the old staircase was, there was a landing there. So the ceiling height is like 7 foot 2 inches when you walk in. It's a little tiny hallway with a powder room right there. And that's kind of like, that's all you have. But yeah, it's a sliding glass door that you can't unlock from the outside.
Okay, so to go back to the standards here, and then we can, we can discuss a little bit more about it. I want to go to the third standard, which says special conditions and circumstances do not result in action of the applicant. This standard is always typically referred to as a self-created, in subject of like differing opinions on it. The house design pre-existed the current ownership. The proposed design would be consistent with what was always there and meets design criteria to not need site plan approval. So the design and the architecture of this particular project has been sensitive enough to all our standards, designs, and guidelines that it doesn't need site plan approval. All he needs is for approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals in order to go ahead and apply for building permit for this project. Part of the contention would be, again, that the design of the home does not allow for normal expansion while counting the lot coverage in the third floor. So the garage is the garage. And by the difference between the 1.6 and the 2.7, to me, really isn't the issue. The issue becomes does the functionality of the house outweigh the 2.7 feet, which comes out to like 170.
About 160 square feet.
Yeah, 170 square feet ballpark. So that's kind of where that is on that. And then, and I'll go through the slides and talk about that. And then 4, literal interpretations of the provision of this ordinance would deprive the applicants of right commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under terms of this ordinance, and the variance is the minimum necessary. Mr. Morgan will speak and has spoken to the minimum necessary as for what he needs. They'll have to prove this to your satisfaction. There are design irregularities on the rear portion of the structure, which is not allowed for today's amenities, and depending on how you incorporate the third floor argument, you may be able to reach a conclusion on both. Part of the issues that you have with this, and I do want to go to, let me do this. I'm going to get really good at changing this. Okay, so when you take a look at these plans here, and you see what they have, this is what they're looking for. So when you walk in here, you have a mudroom. The mudroom in and of itself, if you take a look at it, is the size of just an entryway. If this mudroom was pushed back into the house, there would be no kitchen space. So you wouldn't be gaining anything necessarily by doing this. And even though you're recreating the walls and you're recreating a lot of this in there, what you're doing is you're leaving the front of the house, the streetscape of the house intact. So when you take a look at the first and the second floor, you're taking into consideration that now you're having a powder room on the main level. You have a pantry, which is the kitchen, and then through to the dining room and the living room. The areas of the dining room and the living room already exist. So you're pretty much married to that, but your space is at the back because you're altering it and you're putting up the second floor or what it is. So those are considerations. The second floor plan, as you can see here, you have a primary foyer. This is going out onto the balcony, which is the covered porch for below. The primary bathroom on the second floor is significantly larger, and there's also a second hallway bathroom to allow for their guest rooms and also an office, which I'm sure at one point could be converted to a bedroom if need be. So those are kind of things that are normal. The other thing that Mr. Morgan pointed out was the amount of the staircase. So when you're taking a look at the staircase, an average straight run staircase is approximately 4 by 15. So you're looking at approximately another 60 square feet that I believe that Mr. Morgan's entitled to that he hasn't taken out of the calculations. So basically, that pretty much wipes out the set aside for the garage. So you know what I mean? If you're taking 60 square feet out, but out of the building, it's the same roughly as the garage size for the overage. I want to go to this page over here. Okay, so here's the third floor of the plan. This is where like a lot of the interesting things come up to be. He's looking to just create a closet here, wall this off and create a bathroom here. This area here at the top, which you can see is open to below, so it doesn't count as square footage. This gable end here allows them to get light in over the open to below area and allows it to come into the balcony, so it really brightens up this. So this really here is an architectural feature that allows light to come into the third floor. So when you take a look at the rear structure, which is here, this is what you're looking at. So the space here where the gable that Mr. Morgan's introduced on the back of the house is no higher than the regular house and doesn't extend the eaves any further to the side of the house. This is the double doors on the back, and this would then become on the second floor, which allows them to walk out onto this, which now becomes a balcony. And this is their main point of entry to the house. So they will use this rear entry to the house infinitely more times than they ever will the front, because that's where they park. So when they get out of the cars, that's where they're going to come in. So I just want to point that out. Now, for the last thing, and then I'll leave you to deliberate this. So this is what you have here right now currently. So basically what's going here, there we go. So what you're looking at here is this little bit here. So basically you're taking these lines and going to the same peak point so you have the same symmetry. So this will just allow for the center below, and then when this area here now is all open, this will come into play. This right here, these windows, everything right here is coming out. So this area here where they have this door wall which doesn't match or fit up with anything will now be that door that we saw on the back of the structure underneath the covered porch, which allows them to have a covering over them when they're bringing in stuff from the car, unloading, or whatever it is. And then right now here's the third level plan. So when we talked about it, we showed about it before, this area here, which is gonna be the open to below, this was the staircase area. So the problem that you had with the staircase area was that, it doesn't work. And if it doesn't meet the rise and the run, then you have a problem with respect to, codes and living up there and occupying it, if you touch it. So Mr. Morgan had to move the staircase, so there was no other way to do that. But other than that, I mean, you're looking at this, and if you can take it, what you have to consider is that one, Mr. Morgan has addressed the impervious surface issue, but you have to take a look at it and say, well, were the special unique circumstances and conditions, do you consider that to be the lot, the configuration of the lot, the existing garage, the fact that the house has no serviceable back door or side door off the driveway, and then you can take a look at that. The second standard, the variance will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the general welfare. There has been overwhelming support from people that are in the neighborhood, direct neighbors, and some people a few streets away. But I will say this project's drawn interest from all over Huntington Woods. Then on the third, the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. This is one of the things that you wrestle with on almost every appeal. Because they want to do it, or they would proffer that they need to do it, is that a self-created hardship? Well, the issue is that if you can determine that the house, the lot, the architecture had something to do with not being able to use the house in the normal manner that it would be used, or the space in the normal manner that it would be used, then you may be able to satisfy that condition. And then again, the literal interpretations of the provision of this ordinance would deprive him of the rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under the terms of this ordinance. And part of that would be indicative that, like, look, you know, he's got 600 square feet upstairs on the third floor. How would that play out if that was on the regular floor? Then you decide, well, am I gonna count this third floor for him? Am I gonna legitimize this? So that's kind of where you're at with that. We've kind of gone through this pretty good. If Mr. Morgan has anything else that he wants to add, I'm happy to put up more slides for you guys, or you want to answer any questions, or if the board has any questions for myself or Chris, I'm sure we'd be happy to answer.
Did you do a calculation on the first and second floor? Proposed square footage without the third?
Yeah, it's, I got it on the plans, actually.
I'm gonna put this up here.
Yeah, I was looking for it on a plan, I couldn't find it.
It's on A7, but it's,
Chris, I've got this up.
oh, that's my, yeah, that's,
Alright, so proposed main and,
the proposed, so without the third floor, if we didn't count the third floor, we would be 104 square feet over the 3,100. We'd be at
3204?
3204, yep.
Hank, at what point does that 630 square feet of third floor transition from attic to like usable square footage?
It's livable space, but I will tell you that because it's livable space and Mr. Morgan was forthcoming, there's been nothing hidden on this project whatsoever. That space came into play. Oakland County doesn't have that space on record.
So they're not assessed, that space is not.
So they're actually, I don't believe that they're assessed for that.
Is it still in the ordinance that if the knee walls are below 5 feet, it's considered?
That you have less space. If it's
Okay,
less
so-
space.
I think that's might be where you were going.
Not really.
Okay.
I mean, honestly, where I was going was, I think it's a lot less of an ask when you're just looking for first and second floor.
Yeah.
The third floor is a living space, yeah. If you're lazy like me, you're not gonna spend a lot of time
Right.
climbing 2 sets of steps, you know? It's a nice space, but is it really comparable with what your neighbors have, which is 3,100 feet on the first and second floor? Not, in my opinion, no, it's not. What counts is the first and second floor. The third floor is already there. Somebody did it before it was an issue. So I think what we're really looking at is 104 square feet. Of which, I mean, is that, you back out that 80 feet of extra garage, it's being counted against it, if that's the way it's working. We're at 24 feet over. And I don't know if that's
Well,
true.
I would also add,
You're confusing, I don't wanna confuse the square footage of lot coverage.
Oh, with lot
versus
coverage,
the
you're
square
right, you're right,
footage
you're
of the
right.
house.
Right, but we're really, this is just my opinion, my interpretation, is we're really talking about 104 square feet. Because that third floor,
plus there's a hardship with not having the back door.
Aren't they making renovations to the third floor? Aren't you guys-
Well, so I have to
I can't-
maintain it, I've gotta rebuild the stairs,
Right.
so that's one of the renovations. And because the stairs elongate, what I'm doing to have to the right of the stairs, if you're looking at it from the front, to have any kind of decent space, I'm taking the bathroom and turning it 90 degrees. And then I'm actually making, there's an existing closet, I'm actually making the closet a little smaller, making the knee wall shorter, so that we have a nice kind of square area there where you can have a couple of chairs or whatever.
So I just can't get on board. They're gonna use the space if they're putting money into it, for sure.
I mean, I'm not sure that we need to like, make the numbers dance
No.
to approve it. I mean, if it's like about the, sort of the totality of the circumstances and the historic character in a 21st century, quality of life usage, it seems to be not, go ahead.
I don't know that we're entitled to 21st century usage. We buy old houses, right? My house is 1927. I did an addition and I stopped exactly at 3,200 feet. Exactly. And I wanted to add another bathroom and I didn't because of that.
I'm struggling to see, like, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm sorry. But to me, there's a big difference between 700-foot ask and 100-foot ask. One is a little, in my opinion, a little bit of a stretch. The other is negligible. And I'm kind of looking at this, my interpretation more as it's a negligible ask. But hey, we're all, entitled to our own interpretation. That's why we all vote. So.
David, so just for clarification, your thought process is that because you have approximately 600 square feet up there now, that's already there, and then you back that out of the equation.
Right, to me, it's third floor, sure, it's living space, and I'm sure they're not the only ones in Huntington Woods that have snuck living space in an attic. Or
And
a
I do
third
want to
floor.
point out
It
that
wasn't
it wasn't
them.
them.
Yeah.
Right, okay, I apologize, but they bought it that way.
Yeah.
That's correct.
Right, so, I'm sure they're not the only ones. But to me, it's not the same as first and second floor space, again, just my interpretation. And I think when the ordinance was probably written, and they limited 3,100 feet, they were probably thinking first and second floor.
Yeah.
They weren't considering third floor.
We're not even
Well, I think that's
supposed to have a third.
where I was struggling, is if they ripped all the drywall out of that and put insulation and storage up there, nobody would pretend it was living space,
It
right?
wouldn't matter.
But now all of a sudden they drywall, put a bathroom, now it's, well, if I do that in my basement, it doesn't count.
It's below grade.
Well,
But why is it different, I guess? I'm kind of
Below
siding
grade
with,
is just different, but the issue is that up at the top, when you have a zoning classification, like you have R1A, which are the acre lots, you have R1B, which are the bigger lots typically up on the hill. You have R1C, which is scattered throughout Huntington Woods and incorporates the lots that are just bigger than R1D, lots are sized starting at 7,000 square feet. So that's where the R1C is. The reason that we wanted to keep originally, and I can speak to this because I was here when this all happened many moons ago, was that they didn't want third floor houses because they wanted to keep the house height down. And the reason they wanted to keep the house heights down was because not only did they impose house height restrictions, but house heights down in certain areas because you have light, air, and those are considerations that have come in through the planning commission many, many times. So when you go to the R1B zone district, you can now have 2.5 stories. So now in the 2.5 stories, which is relatively a block away from this, you have the R1B lots, and the R1B lots can have 2.5. If this was at the end of the block in that respect, they wouldn't need the variance for the third floor because it's actually 2.5 when you do the calcs on it, it's actually 2.5, but the space is there. So if that plays into your thought process, that's the way it was, and that was the way that it was designed. It was to reduce the impact and massing of third floor structures in a neighborhood that might be next to a house that might have 26 feet, and now all of a sudden, this house has 35 feet.
I suspect, and maybe Hank, you were there, when they wrote these ordinances, and they said in this district you get 3,100 square feet,
Yes,
I think they were probably trying to prevent Bigfoot type houses
that's
that
exactly what they were doing.
not use the footage that was in the house. I think in this case, you're not spreading out to a huge lot coverage percentage like you'd see, say, in Birmingham, where you've got minimal green area. Is the roof line getting taller?
No, that's one of the things I wanted to actually point out is, so like, the main gable of the house, which is encapsulating that third floor, that is all staying there. Okay, so like, and to your point, like some of the knee walls up there are 3 foot high, and some of them are 5.5 foot high where they step in. But so it is truly, it's not a very tall house when you look at it compared to the other houses on the street. It's relatively the same height as the house to the south, if I remember right. So yeah, it's not a tall house, and we're not changing that height. And that was part of what I wanted to do. I was really concerned about changing that front facade with those great dormers on the front. If I started raising that ridge, it was going to make those dormers look they were too far down on the roof line. So I wanted to keep that, and that's why we came up with the idea of the reverse gable on the back.
If I could also add, if it's David, if I have that right.
Yeah.
The calculations that you walked through are, I have to say, are spot on the way we were calculating it at the time. And when we looked at the house as a listing, as a real estate listing, it listed at 2,336 square footage, so we were trying to calculate it in terms of that first and second floor livable square footage. We have no intentions of
I get it.
living
I hear
third
what
floor space.
But I think I understand.
Before we go any further, I need to open it up to public participation if there's
I have
anyone
one
from,
question too.
oh, go ahead, Jim.
For one, I mean, the house has been the same height since it was built. I mean, the third floor revisions, in my opinion, are only an enhancement. I mean, it was there, you're making it better. The question I did have though is about lot coverage, Hank.
Yes.
The lot coverage specifications are driven by permeable area so that the water can soak in. Is the driveway not included in that? I just see a lot of.
It's not. And here's the situation, and here's how the calculations are. There are two calculations for lot coverage. One is your structures cannot cover over 50% of the rear yard as established by the rear lot line and the rear of the house in the contour that it follows. In this case, the house would be fine because the new addition would be establishing the rear lot line. The space that would be counted for the 50% would be what there is of the driveway going to the 20 by 20 garage. So it's only 400 square feet. And if you take a look at the plot plan, which I do have up there, you see how much space there is back there. So that's the difference between that. So that pedestal would be met. What's not met because of the way that the addition's being put on is the overall lot coverage, which is 30%. And what's 30%? 30% is anything covered by a roof. It doesn't count driveways, it doesn't count, walkways or anything of that nature. So having said that, that leaves us where we're at right now.
The driveway is not.
The driveway's not
in
entering
any
into
calculation.
For this calculation, the driveway won't enter into it.
That's where I struggle is the lot coverage size, the 2.7%.
Well, and if I could add too, next to the addition, we're actually gonna be cutting out some of the driveway that's covering green space, if you will. And so like from the right of the mudroom bump out, that little area to the corner, we're gonna let that all be green space. So, I mean, again, we're only really talking about 80 square feet that we're off. And so there's probably, as far as actual green space, we're probably pretty close on the calculation.
So where it says porch will not be porch, it'll be green?
No, on the,
This
where,
area
where
over here.
Hank's pointing right there, that'll
Oh.
be green space. And then I will
Is that
tell you
what it
too, the
looks like?
porch
Wow.
is gonna be decking material. Not that it's a big deal, but water that flows
Yeah,
in on that
that's-
will seep through and, versus it being concrete.
But if you wanted to meet the letter of the law, you'd have to trim the porch back.
I'd have to not cover the porch or lose or lose the mudroom. All right.
Any other questions before I open it up? I'm going to open it up now to public participation. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak for or against the applicants? Please come up here and state your name and where you live.
Hi, I'm Mark Nakasher. I live at 25505 Wareham. I've been there for 18 years. I've looked at the plans, and I do believe that what they're proposing will really enhance the home for the homeowners, for the direct neighbors, and for the neighborhood in general. The ability to access the home from the back of the house is really important for most people, and I think that what they're doing would really be a benefit to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
I'm Scott Bizdock. I live at 10714 LaSalle. I just think about the spirit of zoning ordinances and why they're put into place. It's one, to respect the neighborhood, the community, the people that live within it, as well as the beauty that is Huntington Woods and that particular street. I think that's, in essence, what they're actually trying to do most urgently is protect the historic nature of the house, enhance it to make it more livable today. Because I think, to your point, everybody does, like the character of an older house. But, if we would say that you're not going to affect an older house to make it more modern, then we wouldn't have internet. We wouldn't have a lot of modern conveniences you need today. And the last thing is, the community and the people around it, just the sheer support of, the neighbors next door, which are going to be most significantly impacted, as well as people even in, further proximity, I think shows the endorsement that a lot of us have for the project.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Mr. Chair, before you close public participation, or at least before you vote, I would like to make one more comment, so why don't you let the public finish and then I'll...
Sure. Seeing nobody else from the public, I'm going to close public participation and turn it over to you, Hank.
Thank you. Just one more comment on this particular drawing, which you can really kind of see pretty good. This right here is the back of what their anticipated project is. This is the back of the building next door, of the house next door. So as you can see, the entire structure, even though there's a garage attached to it, comes back further than the house that you have here.
But that last portion is the garage.
The last portion is the garage that is contiguous.
Okay.
So it's not like this structure is going to dominate over this structure because this structure is already there.
Right.
So I just wanted to point that out. I didn't want to leave that on the table.
And now, Hank, just because there's 3 variances.
You can take them separately or together, whatever your pleasure is. Mr.
Okay,
Chair.
all right, thanks. Open it back up to the board for discussion and or a motion.
I'd like to suggest that we combine these into 3, given the overall footprint and depending on how you add it up, there's not a lot of addition to the existing house from the structure that was previously there. I see this as kind of one package thing.
If you prove 2 out of 3, it doesn't give them
Doesn't
much.
do it.
Yeah, I don't see it.
Just wanted to make sure.
Meaningful on it.
Yeah, and I feel the same way Dave does, that 3rd floor wasn't theirs. That was a detriment to them. They were, it wasn't included in the square footage. I don't think we can look at it personally. So I like looking at it as it's like 100 square foot rather than the 6, whatever.
Yeah, I agree. I'm leaning towards, I'm struggling with that, but I think a 700 square foot ask, I initially thought, no way.
Yep.
There's just, this is way too big, but 100 square foot, that makes, I think, a no-brainer.
Well, I'm kind of thinking about, and this may be not 100% on point, but, when we've had homes that are ranch houses come before the board, we have this point about, I think it's with respect to lot coverage, because ranches obviously cover a lot more of the lot, and a lot of times they're looking for, additional square footage when if they had a two-story house, it wouldn't be an issue, because they're not looking for more lot cover, they wouldn't be looking for more lot cover, it would fit within the lot coverage, and they'd be able to get the more square footage. So I think that's kind of, and we've acted on that before, and I think that's kind of analogous here, you know, with this third floor, and kind of considering, well, the first, you know, the intent of the variance is, they're probably thinking it's just a first and second floor home, not considering a third floor. And so I do think that that's a fair point.
You know, and I'm just one opinion, but I do see the third floor as playing a role in the square footage, given that they're making renovations to it and they're including as part of living space. But I'm only one
I think if the
vote.
square footage took more of the lot coverage away, I'd be more concerned, but what I see on the plan is, I feel that they've done, you know, minimally intruded on all these areas wherever possible, while improving greatly, you know, what the home looks like and the aesthetic of it.
So Hank, I have a question. If we approve a third floor, like we make that variance, will the city of Oakland County then have to come and like reassess? Because
Well,
then it's
they will come and reassess anyway, because.
'Cause the
Mr. Morgan's
permits
got
and
a
everything.
full
Okay.
building permit, and a copy of the building permit goes to Oakland County. So, believe me, they'll pay for that.
Oh, that's what I just said. I said, oh God, their taxes.
That's not our concern, though.
I'm sure that's not
I'll
one of the
see you
things
at the
that they're
border
looking forward
review.
to, but basically, when you have that, and
Yeah.
you're creating the permit puts it right out
Yep.
there. And to Mr. Morgan's credit, is he's always been above board with stuff like this, and rather bring it out and put it on the table rather than tuck it away.
I mean, to that end, I think if we can have different points of how we arrive at this, I think we need to articulate the 734 square
Yep.
feet in the
Motion.
minutes, in the motion, on the record, so that it isn't like
Yeah.
magical realism, right? That it reflects the actual, what will be, the county will measure when they get there, and your generous property taxes that you can start paying anytime now.
What you might wanna do is you might wanna quote the sample motion that you have, and legitimize that also by saying as to match the plans as submitted to the zoning board of appeals. That way there won't be any difference in footprints or anything like that. And you're actually legitimizing it. If you can't figure out between the 104 and the 734, at least you have the plans to reference. So this is what Mr. Morgan and Mr. Talbot and Mr. Nexer brought before the board.
Yeah, it also prevents in the future a legitimate third story being built on that square footage,
It
when it wasn't really
does.
intended to be.
I did a little math and tried to split the baby. Thought, well, okay, if you're gonna get the lot coverage to work, you need to take off 200 feet, approximately, which would require taking off about 8 feet off the back of the house and covered porch, which just doesn't work. So I support it as is. If somebody wants to propose a motion, then.
And we've also approved in the past additional square footage coverage for outdoor spaces, and part of this is two-level outdoor space.
Do it. I move to grant the appeal with 857 Concord from section 40.403 R1A1 to 1E.
Excuse me.
You got a hot mic.
Thanks.
One family district schedule regulations allow variance of the maximum house size where 3834 square feet is proposed and 3100 square feet is allowed, making the variance 730 square feet, and to allow variance from the same section to allow for a variance of 2.7% lot coverage for a total of 32.7%, where 30% is allowed, and a variance to alter an existing non-conforming third floor of the house where 2 floors are allowed in the R1C zoning district. Did I miss anything?
As
Right.
according to the plans
As presented per the plans
at the ZBA.
of Chris Morgan and Associates to the board,
As presented to the.
as presented to the board.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All opposed?
Aye.
So we passed
Motion
6-1.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, for sure, yeah. Yeah, I knew it was getting passed regardless, but.
Yeah. I did it once.
I,
No, I know.
yeah, no offense.
Hey, no, you don't get your plans back. I wrote it all over.
Usually, that's fine, usually guys just
Oh,
you guys don't
okay,
like-
we got one more. Everyone, excuse me. Excuse me.
Do the island,
Excuse me. We still have one other appeal.
the island in the kitchen.
I've never seen someone.
So I was like,
Excuse me. I need a gavel. No.
That's mine.
you guys related to the orthodontist, ma'am, sure? She's doing my
All right.
son's orthodontic work.
We're gonna move on here. Excuse me. I know. There's apparently one in here. It's locked. Oh, no. Here it is. Next, the last appeal tonight is a matter of appeal from Robert, Agnello? No?
It is, but I'm not Robert.
Okay. 26675 Humber to have less than the required 10 feet between a principal structure and accessory structure where 3.5 feet is proposed. Section 40-6.03 accessory buildings, structures and uses. A detached accessory building shall be no closer than 10 feet to the principal building or another accessory building. Go ahead.
Hi there, I'm Andrew Danher, architect for Robert Agnello. And I thought he was going to make it tonight, but I'll try to do my best to speak to his
Okay.
kind of personal side of it. Robert and his family have been in Huntington Woods for a little while now. They recently moved, or had to move due to size, and have been looking for a house for a long time. They currently live in Royal Oak. He has kids who go through the Berkeley schools right now, and their hope was to find a place in the city. He's a real estate agent, so they found this house. And we've been looking at it for a couple years now. We've been in touch with Hank a few different times on this. We've been through site plan approval already. His goal was to create a 4-bedroom house on this site, and our goal as architect and owner was to do an up and back. Really creating a colonial out of a Tudor, matching the house to the south, or very similar to the house to the south. Doing an all brick addition, upgrading the amenities, similar to the previous one, creating a kitchen that was worthwhile and similar to other houses in the area. We tested this a few different ways with the 4-bedroom house, and really the encroachment on rear yard and the close proximity we get to the garage without physically connecting the two, we felt was the better way to do this. The house kind of steps in the rear, has a rear entry, and meets all the other criteria of the city. We're not expanding minimum lot coverage. We're under the lot coverage. Really, our encroachment to the garage, I think, is the main one, and then our rear yard setbacks. So.
Go ahead, Hank.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Basically, the situation is that the map that I have up right now explains it all when you take a look at it. Mr. Danaher, when he was designing the house, was faced with a problem in that you can't put anything on the ground of any reasonable size, which he is entitled to, without encroaching on the existing garage. So where does the practical difficulty or hardship come in? If you take a look at the front yard here, which you see is substantial, you have a 50-foot front yard setback on this, where 30 is required. So basically, this house starts 20 feet further back than the zoning district allows. So he's already 20 feet further back. He has a huge front yard, and he's got a negligible backyard. But he can't add on to the front of the house because this, if you were to try to add the same space onto the front of the house, this and this would be your front yards. You couldn't go any further forward than that. So by virtue of the fact that the way the house sits on the lot, he didn't have a choice. He had to go off the back. Now, I will tell you that while we have the 10-foot separation, the 10-foot separation was put in place primarily to allow access, light, and air. I've talked to the building inspector on this particular one because what Mr. Danaher did was he designed this house to 3.5 square feet, which is actually the exact amount of what's in the building code. It does not, however, match the Huntington Woods ordinance, which is looking for more light, more air, and more whatever. So then, once he said that it was fine with the building code, I went over to public safety and talked to our public safety director because I wanted to make sure that if there was a problem, can you get back there? I was assured by the public safety director that if they need to get into a backyard to fight a fire in Huntington Woods, it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
So, and that's also a testament to our excellent public safety department, but aside from that, he had no qualms about getting between the garage and the house if there was a necessity to do so in order to fight either a garage fire, a house fire, or anything next door where they had to access for. So having said that, we covered those bases on that, but when I'm looking at this, the situation, and to me, it doesn't so much relate to the architecture as it does where the house is sitting on the lot. So, having said that, when you take a look at the criteria that's necessary for the zoning board of appeals approval, special or unique conditions, well, when you take a look at this and you see where it's sitting on the lot, this is different because the house has an existing garage, the addition puts them closer than allowed, but it'll give more usable space. They don't exceed any other criteria, so it's not likely that they put the addition on and need a size variance as well. So the garage is closer to the main structure in part because the house sits so far back from the front street at 50.1. And it starts back much further than the required 30 feet or the neighbors of 45.2 or 46.1. So when you're looking at, and those are the measurements of the house next door from there to the street based on the survey. So two, the variance will not be injurious to the neighborhood or otherwise detrimental to the general welfare, and I've had no adverse communications on this at this time. And three, the special conditions and circumstances do not result from the actions of the applicant. The house design pre-existing the current ownership. The proposed design would be consistent with what was always there. The contention would be is that the design of the home and location of the lot does not allow for normal allowed expansion. The square footage that Mr. Danaher designed to add onto the house, they're entitled to. What we're really talking about is where it is and what it meets the needs and where it's practical to put the addition. And again, if the house was slid forward to the zoned front yard setback, Mr. Danaher wouldn't be here this evening.
And we looked at it a few different ways. There's an existing rear sunroom, if you will, that is ready to fall down, so that's really part of this. And if we were to shrink it up to that footprint, really the second floor ends up still as a two-bedroom house with maybe some large bedrooms.
It's not, yeah, I mean, it basically, again, if you take a look at it, that's kind of where you're looking. But standard 4, which says the literal interpretation of the provision of this ordinance would deprive the applicant of rights commonly enjoyed by other properties in the same district under the terms of this ordinance, and the variance is the minimum necessary. Again, most residents will have a greater distance between the rear of the house and the garage, even prior to this proposed addition. Even though the lot is 140 feet deep, there's less space on a typical R1D lot, with this being R1C. So if you had an R1D lot, this was R1D, most R1D lots had more space between the back of the house and the garage, and this is R1C. So this house being slid back kind of creates, or it could be interpreted that it kind of creates the practical difficulty for the whole situation. Otherwise, they wouldn't be here this evening. With that being said, if there's any other questions, or you have questions for myself or, Mr. Danaher, I'm sure that we could be happy to answer those.
Thanks, Hank. Any questions before I open it up to the public?
Is this a bungalow or?
It is an existing kind of bungalow-ish house, yeah.
Are any of the sides of the bungalow built out currently, or is it a?
No, not yet.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just a single-story sunroom on the first floor, really. And we looked at even connecting garages, talked with Hank a lot about that, and there was going to be a whole series of other variances that would be required if we physically connected the two structures, so.
If they connected the garage, then all of a sudden you need a 30-foot ask rather than the 7-foot for the distance between the two. And it's much greater because at that point in time, then you lose 25 more feet.
And we talked about building code concerns, because the 5-foot or 10-foot isn't all about access, it's also about fire. So if we needed to, as we talked with Dwayne and Hank, as far as permits go, the owner is okay with the idea of fire rating the interior of the garage to kind of contain any kind of concerns from that matter. So-
At the 3.5.
So there's two fire, one is access to the easement, the second is should the garage.
Yeah, in some cities, they look at it as a fire separation. It's really for garage to garage usually, but in this case, it would be garage to
Right,
house.
but at 3.5 feet, he's
Yeah.
not required to do that.
Right.
I will say, I have an experience where my previous home's garage was more than 10 feet away, and my neighbor's garage burned down, it still burned mine down. So I'm not sure the 10 feet's gonna help you there.
Maybe you got a new garage out of the deal.
Is there any known reason, why was this house built so far back from the street? I mean, I gotta imagine
I mean, it
it's
looks
sitting
like-
back from its neighbors, right?
Yeah, that, it's even sitting back from its neighbors, and I think that basically, and none of the street lines have changed. So at some point in time, somebody decided that's where they wanted, or they wanted to be back further than their neighbors. I do not know off the top of my head whether the neighboring houses were built first and this was built back, or the other one. But I can tell you at the time that all three of these houses, when they were built, it wasn't zoned with front yard setbacks. So they pretty much picked a mark and built it there.
So we would not allow a house today to be built that far back. Is that correct?
I think
We would if it met the rear yard setbacks, the side yard setbacks, and the front yard setbacks. I just can't imagine anybody doing it because you'd automatically handicap yourself in the amount of square footage you can put
Is
down.
there anything non-conforming now that's built?
That's non-conforming?
Yeah.
No.
So the septic,
The front setback is non-conforming, but it's not illegal to have it more, it's illegal. to
right,
have
I
it
get it, I'm
less.
just saying it's
Yes.
an odd situation you got here.
It's a very odd situation.
You're adding an enclosed space to add more square footage. Why, what else did you consider? Did you consider building?
I mean, we've considered
building
addition
out
on the front even and kind of flipping this. And then like Hank said, there's the provisions for front yard setback, but then there's also some disclaimers in there about neighboring houses. So we can't go any further than them. And they're also back
Setback.
farther from typical
And
lot
many of the
lines.
bungalows in the neighborhood have a dormer on the back to
Yeah,
give
right.
more square footage.
So what,
Which is really sort of the way we're doing this, but it's a two-story version of that on the backside.
so what happens if you attach the garage?
If you attach the garage, it automatically becomes non-conforming because in the R1C district, you have to have a minimum of 35-foot clear rear yard.
So we'd have a side
And
yard.
Once you
and a rear
attach
yard.
it, it does not become a detached garage, and the setbacks are not 6 and 3, the setbacks are now 35 and 3.
So you need a
35 and
variance,
5.
either way you would need a variance.
Well, you need a variance either way, and this is the way that he's doing this here, this is the.
It's a good
less-
straw man for
I
this
think
being.
so. I know it's.
Oh, we can't do
opinion,
that.
Don't
It's hard
want
to get an
that.
attached garage.
Besides,
This is the
it
minimum
builds
of
character to
minimum
walk your
thing.
garage.
You should have come in with a 10-story ask, you know, so we cut it down to just the garage.
Well, if you take a look at it
Trade
too,
off.
the way that Mr. Danaher has designed this, you're coming up with a 28.8 for lot coverage. If he had to go back and even go to attach the garage, now you've not only got the rear yard setback asked, but you're into the lot coverage as well.
What's the side yard setback in the garage is currently,
It actually sits further back than I think
It's
the
5.1
minimum would
on
be.
the corner and 5 point.
4 on the back?
Yeah, on the back side. But the issue with that really is that exists, and that would work if you were gonna attach it. But what wouldn't work is the additional lot coverage that you would take to get it to attach,
And your
plus
rear
the
yard.
rear yard setback, which it just would obliterate.
This is a good visual, the second to last page.
You can really get an idea.
You can see they've highlighted kind of that little add-on within the new build.
just out of curiosity, you gonna
Big
re-brick the
project.
whole house or try and,
Say it again?
you guys, it's just not applicable, but are you gonna re-brick the whole house or just try and match it?
We've matched it pretty well, as far as, some local brick guys. We're gonna try to reuse a little bit of the brick and kind of, there's some stone on the east side of the house that'll probably get reworked as far as some of the lower level position on the house, but, we'll match it and it's gonna go vertical. There's some things we're adding on the front, a little bit of metal roof, a little bit larger covered, front area, which exists today, but it would just be covered now. We're not changing the porch dimensions. Really two-story brick house. And I know those look like some small plans you're looking at, but I think one thing that happened during part of our site plan approval meeting is we determined we were gonna replace all the windows in the house. there was a period of time we were gonna keep some of the lower level windows, and by the time we get done, we're only saving maybe 6 or 7 windows, and it didn't make sense, so they're gonna do them all.
I'm going to open it up to public participation if there's anyone from the public who'd like to speak. Seeing or hearing nobody, I'm going to close public participation, open it back up for further discussion and or a motion.
I'll make a motion.
I just want to say an opinion, maybe.
Yeah, go ahead.
So, I don't know, I'm trying to visualize walking into this yard and seeing this, you know, normally you walk in the yard, you see some green space, there's light coming through. I don't think you get that here, it's really choked off. I don't like that. I think the 10-foot distance between structures are there for a number of reasons we've barely touched on, I believe. I think 3.5 feet is just too small.
Just so you know, currently, it looks like there is no green space there. It's all like brick
Those are
paver and
temporary
cement.
pavers, so I don't know if we can count that as.
Oh, okay.
What is the distance between that little add-on and the garage now? Is there a way to,
Looks to be about 4, I think it was. It was just under 8. It's like 7.4, I think.
okay.
Between the existing,
Yeah.
So it's
16 sunroom in the face of the garage.
pretty close.
You're showing the edge at 11.6, so you've got 11.6. So you're 3.6.
Guaranteed.
You're less than 10 feet still anyway, from the way it appears.
I also think there are other ways to get the square footage that maybe haven't been considered.
I guess one of the questions I ask when we do this stuff is somebody gonna look back one day and be like, how the heck did that get approved?
well, and that's where I struggle when people come and speak on behalf, because neighbors change. I have a variance next to me 2 houses down. I would have spoken up against it, so.
Yeah, to me, it's just gonna be too odd looking, not gonna fit the neighborhood.
Yeah, I wish the homeowner was here to be able to speak, but in his opinion, when we talked about it, it was creating a more private area in the rear yard out of
Was
this
he,
house, so and that was.
was he
their
just
reason.
suddenly not able to attend,
I
or?
don't know, he's supposed to be here today, but,
Can we,
If you want, we can.
I mean, I don't
Table
know
it.
that it
I
changes
would tell
it,
you
but.
that he has representation, so he's not required as long as Mr. Danaher is authorized to act on his behalf. You're fine to proceed, unless he would decide that he would like Mr. Agello here.
I think it's fine. I don't.
This is a tough one.
James, I think you're right. I don't know if I can make a decision one way or another without exploring or understanding other options.
I'm personally not seeing the practical difficulty of adding square footage when there are other ways to add it.
Right.
With a bungalow, there are many ways to add it. Yeah, our options are to make a motion, see how it goes, table it, see if we've missed something, and have the owner come back and take this conversation into account, see if there are any other things we may have overlooked.
We can't redesign it on the fly, that's a rule in our city, so I don't think even if he was here, we would be redesigning a house for you today, so. We've looked at it, again, for multiple ways, and I know you speak to the point that there could be other ways to find square footage, but we honestly haven't found it or seen it or
Can you like
don't see it.
like I know.
Third
a
floor?
bungalow- no.
We can't go there.
Not that.
Don't go to the third floor.
Don't go to a third floor, but
See how that was.
I mean, we've maximized the square footage of second floor by truly turning it into colonial, so I
Okay.
don't think there's anywhere else to find square footage here, but.
okay.
think
So you're
there's
turning it
stuff
from
on
a
this thing.
bungalow to a colonial.
I just think there's. stuff
Plus,
with this thing
it's got to
built
be
back
like the
so
add-on.
Ridiculous.
So
Yeah.
we each get a vote, you know?
Yeah.
I'm gonna make a motion to see if it sticks. See what happens.
Okay.
I'm gonna move to grant the appeal, from section 40-6.03 accessory building structures and uses to allow detached accessory building less than 10 feet from the principal building or another accessory building for a distance of 3.5 as proposed at 266
7.5 Humber, based on the special conditions and circumstances that are not a result of actions of the applicant, referring to the 20 feet or so extra that this house is set back.
Okay, so we have a motion and we have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? So it's it passes 5-2.
It does pass.
Congratulations.
Congratulations.
Appreciate it.
We had some votes today.
I know, well, I'm surprised you went that way on that.
Yes.
I was thinking you
That
would.
one doesn't bother me.
I take a moment just to
My sticking point is lot coverage.
Hey, Nick.
folks.
Gavel, gavel.
Sorry, I just want to take a moment to acknowledge it, and we'll get you a gavel.
It's right here.
Okay.
But
Never needed it
basically, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the return to the zoning board of appeals of Andy Doctoroff. Andy, welcome back. Andy has served on the planning, well, Andy served on just about everything. So, yeah, but you've been a liaison to the zoning board of appeals, I thought, too. Wasn't you? Okay, well, anyway,
Welcome.
he brings a wealth
Welcome
of
to the big-
experience back to the, dais here for the zoning board of appeals. Thank you for coming back into the volunteering, the public sector here. We've missed you. Thank you very much. And also I'd like to acknowledge our city commission liaison, Jeff Jenks, who sat here patiently through this entire meeting. We greatly appreciate it. This is the first meeting that he has attended for this. He's not a voting member, but it's good to see him in attendance, and thank you for that. So, other than that, Mr. Chair, you may proceed with the officers for the year.
Okay, so what am I doing here? Looking for a nomination for the chair?
You're gonna need nominations for both the chair and the vice chair. So as the presiding chair, obviously, you still have to open it for nominations. You are eligible to be nominated. Everybody here is eligible to be nominated for either the chair or the vice chair, except for Andy, as it's his first, he's an alternate, and if elected, he wouldn't necessarily be here for every meeting. So,
Okay.
other than that, Mr. Chair, you can
So
open it up.
I guess I'm looking for nominations for chair.
Do you want to stay, Chair?
I'd be happy to.
I nominate
I
Adam.
nominate Adam.
Yeah.
Second.
Aye.
Third.
All in favor?
Aye.
It looks like you're drafted.
All right.
Not going anywhere.
All right, so now I need a nomination for the vice chair.
Bree.
Oh, God.
Second.
Okay, now, here's the thing, I heard the oh God.
Oh.
Bree, if you're disinclined to accept the position, then you can decline the nomination.
Great.
They can move to somebody else.
I mean, if you want to do that.
If you want to do
If
that.
you want to advance
Yeah.
diversity, that's up to you.
You know.
It's fine, I can do it.
Does anybody else have any?
Anybody want?
Does anyone
Well,
else
does
have any
anyone want to?
Does
nominations?
anybody want it?
No one wants it?
Hearing none.
Okay.
All right, well, you have your nomination, Mr. Chair.
All right, all in favor of Bree as the vice chair? All right, congratulations.
Bree.
Thanks
Hey,
so
all right.
much.
Bree, you're also.
Were you not expecting this today?
Congratulations to both.
Oh,
All right,
just for a year.
Now-
right?
Also want to
The whole
point-
time.
I-
Very Machiavelli.
Hey.
You gotta represent.
I do
guys
also
are
want
just
to point out, guys, Adam, you're gonna wear out your knuckles with this meeting, and I apologize. But I do want to point out that you have, training coming up. There will be training in, March for the, zoning board of appeals. It'll be advanced zoning board of appeals, zoning basics. Some of you have taken this 1, 2, 3 times. Training is required, so the new people will be required to take it.
What day?
I'll send out the email, and then what you'll do is you'll basically send it back to me, and I'll register everybody at once, because the city pays for your training.
Is it required annually or one?
It's
time?
required at least once. I encourage it annually, so if you have the time and you can make it, this year it's 2 days, the 21st and the 22nd, for a couple hours per night on it. So I will send you the information for it. We're just finalizing with the Michigan Association of Planning, who provides our training for these boards. And
is it in person this year? Last year it was on
It's
Zoom.
gonna be Zoom.
Okay,
It's gonna be Zoom, and the reason is for that, then it's easier to get people to sign in, from their houses and get the training and that, than it is to get everybody to come to a location and do it. So that's where we're at with that.
Is there gonna be an email on that, Hank?
Yes, there will be. as soon as I just get the final, I need one more thing from MAP, but those are, we have the dates, and we have what we're training. And it'll be, the planning commission and, the zoning board of appeals will be in attendance on that. It'll all be done over Zoom. So it'll be fairly easy, quick, and, you can still ask plenty of questions. It'll be a good format. We're doing the Zoom also with the Historic District Commission, which is a different set of training.
Great. I need to open it up for public participation. Is there anyone else from the public that wants to address the board at this time? Seeing or hearing none, I'm going to close public participation. I'm looking for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second? Jim, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.